Hey guys, last section, 17.3, solving quadratic equations by the quadratic formula. Alright, so to use this quadratic formula, the first thing you have to know is you have to memorize standard form, because you have to have things in standard form so you can use a quadratic formula. And this is standard form right here. You need to memorize this. So I'm not stupid. I know most of you aren't going to memorize it. You're going to have it written down when you take your tests. But here's the deal. When you take your next math class, they're going to assume that you have it memorized. And you have to have it memorized to use it. Otherwise, you're going to fail their tests. So just FYI. And the way the standard form looks like, this is standard form. And this is written on your notes right here. This is standard form. If I put numbers in... So standard form is what you guys have when you factor something, only we're going to do this instead of factoring. Okay. So the first thing you have to be able to do is you have to be able to recognize A, B, and C. So looking at standard form, you can see that the number that's with the x squared is going to be your A. So on this, A would be 2. Your B is whatever's with your x. And your C stands for constant. So if you can identify A, B, and C, then you can use this, no problem. So when you look at your paper, the first couple of problems that you have on there says identify your A, B, C. And in the first one, you have very similar to this. It's 2x squared plus 3x minus 5. And you have to be sure that when you're identifying these, that you have the proper sign. So in this case, it's a positive 2 for A, B is a positive 3, and C is a negative 5. So you have to be sure that you are identifying the sign as well. Okay, and then you have two more on there. You have B, which you have negative x squared, so that's going to be a negative 1. And this is out of order, so when this is out of order, you have to put it in proper order. I should have said that. Let me write it on the board. So before you can identify your A, B, C, this has to be in standard form. This isn't in standard form because your B is on the wrong side of the equation. It has to be on the side of the equation with everything else. So you're going to have to move this. How do you move this? You do the opposite. Now, what you have over here is you have negative x squared minus 6x plus 2 equals 0. You don't identify your A, B, C until you have it in standard form. So your A is going to be negative 1. Your B, not 6, which if you would have tried to identify your A, B, C before you moved it, you would have put down a positive 6, but it's really a negative 6. And your C is a 2. So you have to be sure you put it in standard form before you go ahead and you identify your A, B, and C. Then, the last example that I have on here, let me write this one down, because it looks a little bit different. It is 5x squared minus 12 equals 0. So when you look at this, you have an A, which is going to be 5. You have a C, which is negative 12. What about your B? You don't have just an X term. So in that case, you're going to make it a 0. Don't just not write anything down. You need to write that 0 in there, because when you use a quadratic formula, you're multiplying. So, and you know anything multiplied by 0 is 0. So it's important that you do write that down. Okay. So D, your example D, the last one on the first page, is something that's already factored. So this comes already factored. And at first glance, you're like, good, it's factored. I don't have to factor it. No, not good. In order to be in standard form, you're going to have to go ahead and FOIL it out. So when you FOIL this out, and it's written down on your paper, when you FOIL this out, you get 2x squared plus x minus 28, that's from foiling, equals negative 23. So the first thing we did is we FOILed this. Then we have to go ahead and put it in standard form. We have to move the 23 over here. So we're going to add 23 to both sides. So that's going to give us 2x squared plus x minus 5 equals 0. This is standard form right here. So after we FOILed, we did this on one that was already factored. This is when we start with something that's factored. Problem given is factored. Number 1, we're going to FOIL. Number 2, put it in standard form. Number 3, we're going to identify our A, our B, and our C after we've done these other 2 steps. So A is 2, B is 1, C is negative 5. So identifying your A, B, and C is what you do after you do everything you need to do to get it in standard form. Once you identify your A, B, and C, now you're ready to use your quadratic formula, which is on the top of the next page. And this you need to have memorized as well. Quadratic formula. So you have to have standard form memorized, and you have to have quadratic formula memorized. And honestly, the people that I tutored the first, up until the week before we got let go because of the COVID, I had to tutor them on this. They didn't have it memorized, and even the ones that had it memorized didn't know how to use it, which was kind of strange because it's not hard to use. Once you identify your A, B, and C, it's plug and chug. Plug them in, solve it. So I'm on the top of page 2 where it says quadratic formula, and it says that you have to memorize it, and you got to make sure that it's in standard form before you identify your A, B, and C. Okay, so let's look at a couple of these. While you're doing your homework, I suggest that you have standard form and the quadratic formula written down on a paper right next to you, so you can just refer to it back and forth while you're doing your homework. It'll make your life much easier. So the first example that we have on here, I got right there, 2x squared plus x minus 5 equals 0. So I can see that it's not factored, which is good. So my second question is it in standard form? Yes, I have my x squared, my x, and my constant all on one side, leaving me with just a 0 on the other. So I can go ahead and I can identify my A, my B, and my C. My A is what? 2. My B is 1. My C is negative 5. So now that I have that identified, and you might want to, I don't know, you could write this a few times on the first couple of problems, and that'll help you get it in your head too. Okay. So now all I have to do is I just have to plug my numbers in. So I have my x, okay? And this is negative b, so I'm going to have negative 1, because this negative comes from there. My b is 1, I plug that right in, plus, minus, radical, b squared, so I'm going to have 1 squared, comes from there, minus 4. 4 is part of the formula, times a, which is 2, times c, which is negative 5. That's all under the radical. This whole top, including the negative 1, is over 2 times a, which is 2. So once I successfully plug everything in, this is what it should look like. Maybe I should put this in parentheses right here. There you go. So my negative comes from the formula. Bring my negative down. 1 is my b, plus or minus, don't forget plus or minus, radical b squared minus, I bring my 4 down from the formula. 2 is my A, negative 5 is my C, over 2 for my formula, times A, which in this case is also 2. So now I have to remember that my radical is a grouping symbol, so I have to do what's under my radical first. So I'm going to bring down this negative 1, plus or minus, and I have my radical. 1 squared is 1, minus negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Negative 8 times negative 5 is positive 40. So my radical doesn't need to be that long. I can erase some of it. Over 2 times 2 is 4. So now I can work this as two problems. So my first problem would be negative 1 plus radical 42 over 4. And also negative 1 minus, because remember the radical is a plus and a minus, minus 42 over 4. So I go ahead and when I look at this, I say, is my 41, oh, it's a 41, not a 42. Oops. Oops. It's Monday morning. What can I say? So I look at my 41 and I say, do I have any perfect squares in there? 41 is not a perfect square, obviously. Can I break 41 down into any perfect squares? No. Okay, so I can't do anything to simplify that. 1 and 4 has nothing in common here. Down here, the same deal. Can I simplify 41, radical 41? No, I can't. So I broke this into two problems. I can go ahead and I can just make this whole thing my solution set because there's nothing else I can do. That's as simplified as it gets. Or I could go ahead and I could write it together where I have my plus and my minus together right here. And I could just write it as one thing. So I could write it like that, or I could go ahead and I could pull them apart. So I can write it as either or. Either break it apart into two or just write it together as one. So this or this is considered my simplified because I can't break up my radical and I can't do any kind of simplification with my 1 and my 4. So it looks long, but really all you're doing is you're just plugging in your numbers. So let's look at another one. And again, this isn't the place where you want to start trying to save room on your paper or what have you. This would not be a good thing to do. All right, so number 2, your next one is 2x squared minus 7x minus 9 equals 0. It's already in standard form. So my A is a positive 2. My B is a negative 7. My C is a negative 9. Then I can go ahead and plug these into my quadratic formula. So I have negative, it's going to be times B. What's my B? A negative 7. Plus or minus, radical, I have B squared, so that's going to be negative 7 squared, minus 4 is for my formula, minus 4A, which is 2, and C, which is negative 9, over, all this is over 2A. 2A, A is 2. So this is substituted into quadratic formula. Okay, so let's go ahead and start simplifying. Negative times negative 7 is going to give me a positive 7, plus or minus radical, negative 7 squared, 49. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Negative 8 times negative 9 is positive 72. Over 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's add what's inside, because we have to do our grouping symbols first. So we've got 49 and 72, which gives us 121 over 4. So is 121 a perfect square? Yes, it is. It's a perfect square of 11. 11 times 11 is 121. So what we have now is we have 7 plus or minus 11 over 4. This is where you can go ahead and you can divide this into two problems if you want. 7 minus 11 over 4 and 7 plus 11 over 4. So 7 minus 11 over 4, and you can go ahead and you're going to have to break this into two different answers. So 7 minus 11 is going to give us what? 4 over 4. That's going to be negative 4 over 4, which simplifies into negative 1. 7 plus 11 gives us 18 over 4. So that's not going to simplify into something nice. It's going to simplify into, see, I don't have my calculator. 4.5. 18 divided by 4. Yeah, 4.5. So our solution set, and you have to pull them apart because it's going to give you two different numbers, unlike the previous problem. Our solution set is negative 1, comma, 4.5. That's our answer. And again, you don't have to look for extraneous solutions because this wasn't a problem that started out with a radical. The problems that are equations that start out with a radical are the ones that you check for extraneous solutions on. Okay. So on this, it was already in standard form. I identified my ABC. I plugged it in. Once I plugged it in, I started to solve. Once I got it down to, I took the 121's a perfect square. Then I broke it into two problems because I knew I was going to have two answers. So let's look at another one. So our next video is going to be, well, you have a test. We'll talk about that in a minute. Any of you that know that I'm technology challenged, which is probably all of you, I figured out how to scan the test into my computer last night so I can email it to everybody. I was quite pleased. Okay, the first thing we have to do is we have to make sure that's in standard form, which that isn't. So how do we put it in standard form? We bring the 8x to the other side. So we're going to have to add it to both sides, which is going to give us x squared plus 8x plus 1 equals 0. So now that it's in standard form, we can identify our A, B, C's. Our A is 1. Our B is 8. Our C is 1. So these are pretty simple numbers. Then we're going to go ahead and we're going to substitute into the quadratic. So that's going to give us negative b, which is 8, plus minus radical. So b squared is going to be 8 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 1, over 2 times a, which is 1. Okay, now we got to solve it. So this is going to give us negative 8 plus or minus 8 squared is 64 minus 4 times 1. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4 over 2. Then we can go ahead and simplify this. So that's going to give us 60 under our radical. So you got to ask yourself, is 60 a perfect square? No. Are there any perfect squares in 60? Well, yeah, there are. So what perfect squares do we have in 60? Well, let me see. I'm thinking if we take 2 out, that's going to give us 2 times 15. Wait a minute. 4, sorry. 4 times 15. 4 is a perfect square. So we can break this down into radical 4, radical 15. So radical 4 is going to become what? 2. And radical 15 we leave as radical 15. So our 60, I'm going to write it down here. I'm going to come down over here. -8 plus or minus 2 radical 15. The 2 radical 15 came from the 60. The 60, the factors of 60, one that's a perfect square is going to be 4 times 15. 4 is a perfect square over 2. Now you got to look at that and you got to ask yourself, can you simplify that? Yeah, you can simplify that. So you have to stop and think. You can rewrite this like this. -8 over 2 plus or minus radical, oops, I forgot my 2, sorry. 2 radical 15 over 2. So I can rewrite this as 2 separate fractions. And the reason I would want to do that is so I can reduce. So 2 goes into -8 4 times. So that gives me -4 right there. 2 and 2 can cancel each other out. So what am I left with? I'm left with -4 plus or minus radical 15 over what? 1 times 1. So I can just leave it like that. That is my simplified answer. So when you get to these kinds of problems, you need to remember to pull this apart. So you make 2 fractions. Where are we at? Yeah, right here. We pulled it apart over here where everything was crossed out. Let me rewrite this. We pulled it apart into 2 fractions so we could do our reduction. You could tell it's Monday. This is me on a usual Monday. Okay, so we pulled this apart into 2 fractions, and from here we reduced. Pull apart to reduce. So we saw common factors right here. That's how we knew to pull it apart into 2 fractions. So if we wouldn't have seen any common factors here, we wouldn't have pulled it apart. We would have circled it and had that be our final answer. But everybody's even, so we pulled it apart and reduced it into -4 plus or minus radical 15. And again, this isn't something you're going to watch me, work a few of these on this video and do your homework, be done, and do the test. You're going to have to practice this. Okay, we got, let me see here, my notes are out of order. I think we got 2 more of these. Yes, we've got 2 more of these. Okay. Okay. So we've got 9x squared minus 12x plus 4. So why don't you guys go ahead and stop the video right now, and I want you to go ahead and I want you to solve that. Okay, so what you guys should have got is you should have got 2/3 for your answer. You should have got 2/3. Now let's see if you did it right. So the first thing you should have done is you should have looked at it and said, is it in standard form? And you said yes. Then you went ahead and you identified your A, which is 9, your B, which is -12, and your C, which is 4. Once you identified that, you plugged it into the quadratic formula. So you had -12 plus or minus radical -12 squared minus 4 times 9 times 4, all under the radical, all over 2 times 9. So if you didn't get 2/3, look at this. Did you substitute it all in right? Because if you didn't get the correct answer, that may be the first place that you made a mistake. So after you have it substituted in right, you go ahead and you simplify this down. Negative times 12 gives you 12 plus or minus radical. You go ahead and you simplify that and you get 144 minus 144 over 18 equals 12 plus or minus radical 0 over 18. Now, you might have gotten there and gone, crap, what do I do? Put in your calculator if you're not sure. The square root of 0 is 0. So that left you with 12 plus or minus 0 over 18. So 12 plus or minus 0 is 12 over 18. And you went ahead and you said, well, I can reduce that. So you reduced by 3, and that gave you 4 thirds. Yeah, no. 4/6, I'm sorry. Which you have to reduce down further. 2 goes into 4 twice, and 2 goes into 6 3 times. So for that, you only have one answer. And that's not typical, because even on the problems that we leave written down, plus or minus radical 12, that's still or if we leave it written like this is still 2 answers because you have plus or minus. So even if you leave it written as one unit, it still represents 2 answers. But down here, that's one answer, 2/3. So take a look at it and figure out where you went wrong. I think that if you plugged in everything right, then you probably got over here to radical 0 and didn't know what to do with it. The square root of 0 is 0. If you didn't know that, you could put that in your calculator. And then I know some of you got down to this and you were like, that can't be right, there's only one answer. Yes, it can be right, there is only one answer, and that's fine. You're not going to have a lot like that. It's not like I'm going to give you a test and, 9 out of 10 are going to be single answers. That's not the way it is. 1 out of 10 being a single answer is fine. But if you're getting more than that, you're off. You're doing something wrong somewhere. Okay, we got one more problem. Let me write it down. So we have x squared minus 9/5 x equals 2/5. And I'm not going to be mean and tell you to go ahead and work this out yourself. We're going to go ahead and go through it together. And the easiest way to do this is clearing the fractions. Remember, how do we clear the fraction? We find one thing that we can multiply each thing by that will get rid of the fractions. So this already both of these have a 5 on the bottom. So if we multiply each term by 5, we'll clear the fraction. So if we multiply x by 5 over 1, that's going to give us what? 5x squared minus, if we multiply 9/5 by 5 over 1, the 5's cancel, leaving me with 9x. And if we multiply 2/5 by 5 over 1, that's going to leave us with 2. So now we've cleared the fractions. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put in standard form. So clearing the fractions, finding something we can multiply each one by. Once we've cleared the fractions, we got to put it in standard form. Not in standard form because 2 is on one side by itself. So we got to put 2 on the other side. So that's going to give us 5x squared minus 9x minus 2 equals 0. Now we're in standard form, so we can go ahead and we can use the quadratic formula. Okay, so the quadratic formula, when we substitute things in, we're going to have minus, what's our b? Oh, we got to go ahead and we've got to define our a, which is 5, our b, which is -9, and our c, which is -2. Let me move this down a little bit. So we're going to have negative, our b is -9, plus minus radical b squared. So we've got -9 squared minus 4 is in our formula. A, which is 5, c, which is -2. all of this is over. 2 times A is 5. So you have to clear the fractions first, then put in standard form, then plug it in to the quadratic formula, and then you're going to solve. So negative times negative is going to give us 9, plus or minus radical. Negative 9 times squared is going to give us 81. We got negative 4 times 5 is negative 20. Negative 20 times negative 2 is positive 40. Over 2 times 5 is 10. That's a 10. Okay. Made that bigger than it had to be. So let's go ahead and simplify this. That's going to give us 9 plus or minus radical. 81 plus 40 is going to give us 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 121 over 10. So is 121 a perfect square? Yeah. Of what? 11. So we're going to break this up into 2 problems. 9 plus 11 over 10 and 9 minus 11 over 10. So this is 9 and 11 is going to give us 20 over 10, which is 2. And 9 minus 11 is going to give us negative 2 over 10, which gives us negative 1/5. So our solution set to this is going to be negative 1/5 and 2. So you may need to clear the fraction on a problem on this test, because I'll be honest with you, and I keep talking about your next math class because the majority of you, the high majority of you, are going to have to go on to another math class, be it stats, quantitative reasoning, college algebra. You have another math class you have to go on to. They expect you to know this. You will pick up right here, but there are so many more little detailed things that can go on with the quadratic formula. So this general, how to plug, how to put something in standard form, how to put in the quadratic formula, and how to plug it out, how to chug it out, they're going to expect you to already know. So you got to be sure you know this. If you don't, you're going to start in a hole, and you're going to spend all your time in the tutoring center. Or you're going to fail and you're going to drop it. So you want to go ahead and you want to memorize standard form and the quadratic formula. Okay, so this is the last lecture for 0031. Now, you got a lot of homework to do, and I'm just going to straight up tell you right now, I want you to send me the review for chapter 16. I want you to send me the review for chapter 16 as your homework. I'll write that down. Because I know some people are saying they can't find me on YouTube. You can find me on YouTube. I sent out an email saying all you had to do was search my name. So the homework that's due is the review for chapter 16. And that's due on Wednesday. No late turn-ins. I don't have time for late turn-ins because the exam is coming. All right, so that's pretty simple as to what your homework is for this. You still have to do 17.3, but the homework that I want you to turn in is going to be the review for 16. Now, like I said, the test, all right, like I said, the test is handwritten. There you go. I wanted to do it nice and fast so you couldn't read it, but you could see that it was handwritten. The test is handwritten, and I got it loaded up on the computer, and it's all in there. It's nice. It's ready to go. I'll email it to you. Now, let me be very clear as to what I want for your answers, because the last time I got this from very few people, and I had to handwrite answer keys for everybody so I could grade it. And I'm not trying to be mean, guys, but I'm not going to do that again. I've got a million things with this online stuff, just like you do, for my other classes as well. So this is what I want for the answer sheet. And if I don't get this, I'm going to give you a 0. I'm not going to grade it. And this is exactly how it has to be for the exam, too, or I'm not going to grade it. And I checked, and I'm well within my rights to say that. So most of you guys follow instructions, but if you don't, you've got to get with the program for this. All I want, you print out the test, and you work out the test, and you have the test sitting right there with you. What you're going to email me is going to be an answer key sheet, okay? You're going to have your name on it. And then you're going to have number 1, the answer. Number 2, the answer. Number 3, the answer. 4, answer. 5, answer, and so on. I do not want you sending me 2, 3, 8 pages of work. I do not want that. I want 1 page from each person, the answer key. If I have a question on your answer, then I will personally email you, and I will ask you to send me a copy of your test. So, this is what I'm looking for, this is what I'm going to grade, and this is how the exam is also going to be. So if you don't do that, I'm not going to grade it. And you got to send it to me in a format that I can read. Some of you guys were sending me formats that my computer would not even identify. And I'm not going to spend 2 days trying to find whatever program that is so I can download it. I'm not going to do that. You have to send it to me in a format that my computer recognizes. So if you got a grade for the last test, then you eventually got it to me in a format my computer could read, and you need to use that for this test as well, and for the exam too. Okay, so on Wednesday, I will send you that email that's going to have the test as an attachment, and it is due Friday. I'm giving you until Friday. Let me write that down. The test is due Friday at midnight. Test due Friday by 11:59 p.m. Okay? So you're going to get it Wednesday, and it's due by Friday at 11:59 p.m. Okay, guys, that's all I got. I will put another video on Friday talking about the exam. Alrighty, bye-bye.